damage, and then 30 more for each prize card your opponent has taken. So of course, throughout the game, this will get stronger and stronger as your opponent KOs more Pokemon. But just some initial translations to go over very quickly. We have a Pidgeot and a Cleffa. Pidgeot is an amazing new stage 2 that I don't think is going to be super great, but in this deck specifically, Pidgeot is pretty strong. Has the ability Quick Search. It says once your turn, you may search your deck for a card and put it into your hand, just any one card. And it also has Free Retreat, which makes it for a great pivot. There's also a new Cleffa, which has 30 HP, which is pretty minute. Cleffa's getting poked, it's getting knocked out. But it does have the attack Grasping Draw that says you may draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. As an addition to just like Pidgeot, it also has Free Retreat. So just going over this first list here, apologies if it's a little bit blurry for you guys. But basically this list, unfortunately you won't be able to play this exact 60 until we have 151, which is coming out in September, because this list is actually playing 2 copies of the Charizard EX from that set. So yeah, that's right, we're getting 2 Charizard EXs very close to each other. But that Charizard does 330 damage for 4 energy, and you have to discard 3 of them, which is kind of bad, but we can use Charizard EX, of course, the Terastal one, to accelerate up to 3 energy, so that's kind of like what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to use one to power up the other. We are playing 2 copies, so we can find it pretty easily, but honestly, you probably won't need it in many games. The Dark type one can carry you through most situations, but it is nice to have that one-hit KO potential. And we'll, of course, look at more lists that don't feature this Charizard, so if you're not a fan of this, or you don't want to wait until 151 to play this list, then there will be very similar alternatives. Some other things worth mentioning about this list is it is playing the 1-1 line of Pidgeot. It's also playing an Entei V as a basic form of attacker. Some of these lists, interesting enough, aren't playing any single prize basic attackers, such as, rather impressively actually, the new Entei or the baby fire type Moltres. But they are playing Entei V, which is interesting. I've seen some lists that also play Delphox V, which is also pretty cool. This list is also playing the Radiant Charizard just because it makes so much sense, so you can have another attacker that's really good in the late game. There's actually nothing too interesting going on with the trainers. It's supposed to be just very consistent, very straightforward, and that's about it for this list. Overall, I would say this is also just a very consistent list, so definitely one I'd be interested in trying out when 151 eventually rolls up. Next up, though, is we've got a list that would function as soon as we get Obsidian Flames, which is, of course, a major selling point. It's also playing 4 copies of the Terastal Charizard, so we're trying to be much more consistent. It's also playing a 2-2 line of the Pidgeot. And then also we have 1 copy of Mew and 1 copy of Cleffa. Why this is super cool is that Cleffa can just free retreat into Mew, so you can kind of pivot between them, depending on which one you want to use. And although this list isn't using it, you could use Beach Court to pivot from Mew to Cleffa as well if you really wanted to, and that honestly could be super helpful. The list is also playing a bunch of other basics like Pumpkaboo, Radiant Alakazam over Radiant Charizard and Radiant Greninja, which is super interesting. And it's also playing the Hawlucha, which allows you to place a damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, as well as Manaphy for some bench protection. So, super cool deck. Honestly, it's not as consistent as a lot of the other lists that we'll see today, but honestly, a really cool list. And not all of these lists are, of course, running the Mew engine, let alone Cleffa, so seeing that is pretty interesting. As for the trainers are also pardon. The trainers are also super interesting because we do actually see 4 copies of the Ryme supporter. So if you don't know what Ryme says, it basically just says you draw 3 cards and then your opponent switches their active with one of their bench, which is honestly a super interesting effect, and I'm not sure why it's overly crucial for this deck, maybe to buy yourself some more time, and maybe, it's just necessary if you're playing this stage 2 deck and you just need more time to get the Charizards going. But it's a very interesting supporter to see. I'm not sure if Ryme will be in very, very many competitive lists, I should say, but it would be interesting to see further down the line. Next up, though, is we have a ultra consistent list, and that is going to be a Charizard Arceus Pidgeot variant. This one playing a 4-3 split, and then a 4-4 split of Arceus, and then a 2-2 Pidgeot. Then it's also playing a copy of Radiant Zard. So ultra consistent, also playing stuff like Colress Experiment, just so you can thin through your deck very quickly. This list honestly just looks like one of the most consistent lists that I've seen so far for Charizard, so I'd be very interested in trying this one out on the ladder personally. Is it going to be the best list? I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if this does end up being one of the better Charizard lists. So very consistent, very straightforward. You're just trying to get Arceus going in the early game. So you just have that kind of early game attacker, as well as Starbirth, of course, can help find your rare candies to set up Pidgeot as well. And then if you really want to, you can actually use Charizard to accelerate energy to either attack with Arceus or I guess Pidgeot if you really wanted to. But very straightforward, consistent list, and yeah, I'm definitely excited to try this one out. Next up, though, is we have another Arceus variant, but this time we're actually playing Bibarel, so if you're more a fan of Arceus variants with Bibarel, then this list would be more suited to you. It's not wildly different from the one we just looked at. It is playing stuff like Charizard Scare, which is a bit pretty interesting. I guess Charizard Scare also means that if Bibarel ever gets stuck in the active, you could move Bibarel, because that's honestly my biggest complaint with Bibarel variants, is that the opponent often realizes that you probably don't play more than like 2 or 3 switching cards, so they will try and stall Bibarel in the active in the mid to late game to buy themselves some more turns and maybe even deck you out. So having access to Sharon's Care is honestly really nice. I would like to see a Palpad though, but just because its porters are a bit wishy-washy, they're a bit here and there. So I might honestly, if I was to like play this list, I would probably cut a Lost City or something for a Palpad. But really, honestly, a pretty strong list, fairly consistent, got a lot going on here, but that is something interesting as well about a lot of these lists is there's like no Charmeleon or Charmeleon, I guess I pronounce it. But yeah, interesting to see either way. And honestly, I could definitely see this list being pretty strong overall. Next up, though, is we have another list that's more focused on the set 151. So unfortunately, if you don't want to wait until that set, then you'll have to make do with, unfortunately, one of the other lists. Basically, this is playing 2 copies of the Mew EX from that set. That has the ability to restart, and that basically says once in your turn you may draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. It also has free retreat, which is really nice, so you just get another pivot. And then it also has the attack genome hack, which for 3 colors just says choose one of your opponent's active attacks and use it as this attack. So honestly, really strong in the mirror as well, because you can just, of course, copy Charizard's big blow up move in the late game, which is kind of cool. It is, however, weak to dark, so you do have to bear that in mind, but then again, 108 HP, you're very fragile. Still, you can copy stuff like Lugia's main attack and do 210. There is like a lot of cool situations where this Mew could be really strong. And of course, it's easy to power up thanks to the Charizard EX. Anything else that's that interesting about this list would probably have to be the 2 copies of NTV instead of like the usual 1. And that is something worth noting, is this deck really isn't playing many like techie basic cards. It's very consistent and streamlined in what it's playing. It's also playing 2 Town Department Store. Is it Town Department Store? Yeah, Town Store. 2 copies of Town Store that says once your turn you may search your deck for any tool card. And this deck is playing 2 copies of the Forest Sealed Stone and 1 copy of Bravery Charm, interestingly enough. So you could make Entei or Mew EX a bit more tanky. But honestly, super cool to see. I guess that's also the Pidgey from 151 that's worth mentioning, actually. The Pidgey that allows you to search your deck for up to 2, I want to say, colorless Pokemon with fighting resistance. I don't think it's a call for family Pidgey. I think it's just a Pokemon with resistance. You can find Pidgeot EX, but if it is call for family, that would be really cool. But yeah, sadly, this list is... Oh, I've just noticed there's actually 4 copies of Peony in this. Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, this is a cool list, but unfortunately not available to us until 151. Next up, though, is apologies for no actual deck list, just a deck image. This is going to be a Lost Zone variant. I was inspired to include this one because someone did comment on a recent video saying they were interested in trying out a Lost Zone build of this deck, and honestly thought this list looked super cool. There is some interesting stuff going on here. There's like a Squawkabilly EX next to Entei, like wedged between Entei and Manaphy. So if you're wondering what that EX was, that's it. And yeah, pretty much straightforward after that. It's just kind of the same Lost Zone stuff, 4 Comfey, 2 Sableye, 1 Cramorant. And I know that a lot of people really hate Lost Zone now, and it's kind of become the new ADP, I guess, in some people's eyes. But honestly, if you're part of the group of people that still really like Lost Zone and still play a lot, then, hopefully this list is interesting to you and you're inspired, I guess, to try something similar out. But yeah, pretty cool list overall. Should be interesting to try out at the very least, even if it's not, of course, the best Lost Zone variant. So next up, though, is going to be just a Charizard straight-up Bibarel variant. I really like this list because it screams consistency, apart from like 2 copies of Capturing Aroma for some reason. I do like 1 copy of Serena, though. That's really fun to see. I know you said like cool to see, I guess, but like the thing is with Serena, I like having additional Gust as well as the option to draw more cards. So Serena, honestly, a really cool addition to the deck, and nice to see that. But yeah, aside from that, nothing really too crazy. 2 copies of NTV again, which I always find interesting because I would say you probably never need more than 1 NTV in most matchups. So seeing 2 copies is interesting. I guess NTV is also kind of bulky, so a bit of a pain for Lost Zone to deal with. But Yeah, interesting list overall. Also running Collapse Stadium, which is kind of cool, so you can thin out your bench if you really wanted to. But yeah, super cool list. Should be fairly consistent. Next up, though, is we've got another Bibarel variant. I know it seems a bit repetitive at this point, but this is playing Pyukumuku, so I thought it was worth including. Also, I honestly prefer like the trainer selection to this list. See, most of these lists from Japan aren't actually playing Battle VIP Pass, which is kind of interesting. So this one definitely playing for VIP Pass. Also playing for Irida, so you can hopefully find it on the first turn going second. Isn't playing Pokegear, so we're not like going full Irida turn one going second, but still, 4 copies is a lot, so we should be able to find them pretty easily. And of course, our reader can find either Greninja, Pyukumuku, Manaphy, and then whatever item we need, be it Rare Candy, VIP Pass, or something like Rescue Car or Super Rod. So super cool list to see. Honestly, I could easily see maybe Arven making it into this list, although I can't think of really any tools that you would want immediately in a Charizard deck, apart from Forest Steel Stone if you're running Entei V or Delphox V. But still a really cool list. Also playing stuff like 3 Artisan for consistency, so like no Magma Base into Charmanders, I guess. But honestly, really cool list, and I'm definitely excited to try this one out. But yeah, it's been Emma Power. Thank you for watching. Let me know what your favorite Charizard list is. And of course, as always, thank you for watching.